When you get a ticket for speeding on Oahu, guess where the money from the ticket goes? To the state. What? Yep. The city police gives the ticket out. The city prosecutor prosecutes it, and the state gets the money. Andria Tupola had something to do with that. Good morning.
Good morning.
But see, I know you hear that, right?
Yes.
And isn't that because there seems to be a them and an us? Everybody thinks that it's actually all just us, right?
Well, and a lot of people think, the cops are out there tagging because they need more money for the department.
Quota. Yeah, they need more. They don't get any of the money.
Nope, they don't.
Yeah.
It goes straight to the general fund, what some people call the black hole.
Is the thinking by some, Andria, that, hey, don't worry, man. We'll just get more tickets. If we need money, we'll just go get more tickets.
Yeah.
Click it or ticket.
Yeah, and I think that's a misconception that everyone needs to understand is that the money doesn't go to the department. Whether or not they have quotas, that's up to the department and each division, but definitely an issue.
Okay, I do know that the big gorillas in the room have to get handled. We're rolling down the end of the trail, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that for those that don't know, because it's for some it's not clear, the session is scheduled to end when?
May 4th.
Yeah, okay, and that's like really soon when you think about it.
14 days.
Yeah.
What? How did I know that?
How did you know that? Because you got this big thing every morning when you get up. 14, tomorrow's 13, tomorrow's 12. Do you feel sometimes that there is some conniving to keep some of the stuff sort of last minute and then throw it up there and quick, we got to vote?
So for the next 2 weeks, starting from today, we have what you call conference committee.
Mm-hmm.
So people are trying to determine, are we going with the Senate version or the House version?
Yeah.
So the different committee chairs are meeting together and they're trying to figure out, okay, we need to keep that, do away with that. But to be really honest, if you've ever sat in conference committee, a lot of it is posturing. A lot of it is who's stronger than the other person, who's going to let down and who's not going to let down. And so at the end of the day, a lot of these people are trying to get their most important bills passed, but there's different, legislators trying to do their little power moves.
I can sort of understand that. And maybe people need to be, refreshed on how it works. Because I do know that when there is a really good House version and a really good Senate version, and they're pretty much in concurrence, that's a pretty good bill.
Pretty much, because that means both sides have already agreed that this is the best way forward.
There are a lot of people that don't get it. Who gets to say with what? And I know that you'll get a lot of calls from constituents talking to you about a Senate matter. There is a division of them and us. Why is it set up to be almost an adversarial situation, checks and balances?
Well, I would say that the checks and balances were initially created so that there was a check so that there's not one chamber more stronger than the other. Supposedly. But there definitely is that feeling of, okay, so if the Senate does these things, then we got to respond with these things, and if they haven't passed any of our bills, then we're not going to pass any of their bills. And I've heard committee chairs say that.
But what's interesting to me is on a national level, when you take, say, the House and the Senate, there is 100 Senate seats. Okay, the House numbers keep growing with population and division, so it's way, way, way lopsided. Here, it's about double. I mean, more or less, right? There's 25 senators and there's 51, or is it 51 House members?
You got it right, 51.
Yeah. So and it doesn't grow. I mean, how would it grow? Just more population?
Well, they have redistricted.
When they redistrict and stuff?
Yeah, they have redistricted.
But the redistricting hasn't added on legislators, in my opinion, for a long time that I know of.
I want to say that in 2014, they added on a new Senate district in Big Island.
Okay.
That's how the former mayor, Lorraine Inouye.
Yeah, but there's still only 25 senators.
I'll have to check that.
Yeah, no, I think they changed the districting, but the number of senators is 25, so you can't have 26 because that way you could have a tie vote. So, the House and the Senate are set up so that there is no, a tie. Now, that can happen if there's a legislator missing, right? Like at the councils, city councils are all 9 members. If there's a council member out, and they have to resign or whatever happens to them, then it's down to 8. Then I guess there has to be a tiebreaker.
Yeah. So people definitely can miss a vote, quote unquote.
Okay, so here's your opportunity to talk with Andria. We'll set the stage for a little bit. We got a whole bunch of stuff coming up this week. Most of it, if not all of it, is extremely important, and a lot of it affects your wallets. And if some of you saw the polls say about the rail, they want the rail completed, but they don't want taxes. The rail is the big lump in between the state and the city right now, between the counties and the state, I should say. It's 16 minutes after the hour. Andre Tupola's in the house, and you can join us at 296-KHNR or the Mike Buck Show at gmail.com.
Now, back to Mike on 690. The Answer.
I'm wondering how many in our legislature, like in Senate and House, are thinking, hi-ho, let's go to work, man. So much fun. Actually, it's getting down to the very measurable end of the session. Rep. Andria Tupola's in the house. There's lots and lots of stuff, and you know, every week we ask her, okay, what's your favorite pet of the week? It really gets down to the point now where you mentioned if there is concurrence at a committee level, these things are going to live. But how many? Now, first of all, there is no more crossovers, right? It's done. It's now at the committee level.
Yes.
So what's happening now is the Senate and the House bills are getting married to each other to be one bill.
Yeah, so I did the committee assignments for our caucus. There's 345.
Mm-hmm.
So 345 bills have not agreed, or the Senate hasn't agreed to the House version. The House hasn't agreed.
Okay,
to the
so
Senate.
that's a lot.
It is.
Yeah. Is it about the same? Is that sort of the number that we're faced with every year about that?
I don't have the comparative number from previous years, but I do know that we've had less bills from the Senate coming over to us than we have in the past.
I'm wondering if sometimes that means that some of the stuff that is obvious gets agreed on early, and that there's not going to be a lot of debate about this because nobody's unhappy about it. It's just common sense, or it makes better sense off an old bill, so we throw the old and put in the new one.
They call some of those bills housekeeping. So there's certain things that we have to do to get up to par with the tax code. So every year there's a bill to kind of reform that so that we're within federal compliance. So there's definitely bills where it's just, this is what we do. This is make sure that we're not breaking any laws.
Okay, somebody told me specifically to ask you this, and this is that people are somewhat lots of times confused. Just because your legislator that you voted for doesn't vote the way you wanted them or he or she to vote on a specific issue, it could be that person is uncomfortable with the language of the bill, not the intent of the bill. So I want to say that doesn't that happen a lot when the governor or even at the county level, somebody vetoes something because they're not happy with the language or how it's going to be enforced?
No, it's totally true. And I think a lot of people who are trying to keep up with legislation, they say, oh, well, this bill is intended to do this.
Yeah.
When you read through the bill and you realize that either one, it's poorly written, or two, it's breaking other federal or state laws because it's not whoever drafted it wasn't careful. Those kind of things make it harder for us to say, oh, yes, the intent is good, but, the language is going to hold us back. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to make good public policy.
Now, a conference committee doesn't fix the language, does it? Doesn't it just vote on exactly what it is?
A conference committee can fix the language.
Oh, it can? Okay, because I didn't know that.
Well, so what happens is we walk into the room, and then basically they'll say, okay, for this version of the bill, the chairs are still discussing what language is going to work best. What we're looking at is paragraph 3, page 2.
Okay.
We're going to change that.
Well, look,
And so they'll say which areas they're trying to address, and then outside of conference, the chairs meet, and they talk about which ones are better. And then we come back into conference, they say, okay, this is the new proposed CD1, so conference draft 1, which means that there's been some amendments since the House and the Senate version.
Well, I know that you hear this all the time. Hey, Andria, how come we got to do that? We got laws for all of that stuff already. Well, if we did, and if they didn't need tweaking, we wouldn't have to make new ones, right? Is it maybe because the public opinion changes or legal opinions change sometimes, and what worked 20 years ago because of gender inequity or bias or one thing or another, it's no good anymore. It's got to be changed.
Could be. I think what a lot of people are frustrated with is when we come up with bills that are duplicative, because we do have laws that need to be better enforced.
Yeah. Okay.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that we create more laws and all of a sudden they magically get enforced.
Yeah.
We need to go back through the book sometimes and say, you know what, that law is on the books. It's not getting enforced.
Yeah, good point. Because don't you sometimes hear from lawmakers, prosecutors, and everybody else, hey, look, this new thing that you're talking about is just as bad as the old one. It doesn't fix the problem, but it makes it worse.
Well, and that's what we need to determine as lawmakers. We shouldn't be making hundreds of laws that are addressing things that are already on the books, but they're not getting enforced. Case in point, Airbnb.
Yeah. And, I do know that one's coming up to the loggerheads. And almost everybody now, because of the way the press is taking it, is making it look like, hey, we got to do this because we're losing lots and lots of tax money. We deserve that money. So therefore, we have to have Airbnb collected.
Okay, but let's go back to the fact that the city needs millions, if not billions of dollars for their rail project.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they need this money so badly, then go out and enforce. Because when we sat in the hearing, we asked them, how many of these rentals are you guys not enforcing, or that they're not complying?
Yep.
And they said hundreds.
Yeah.
So go get the hundreds and enforce it, or maybe make it a priority of the city so you can get your money.
There are a lot of people that have that attitude. And there's also a lot of people that say, hey, you know what? Not only is it non-enforceable, but some of the agencies that are designed to go out and catch the scofflaws, the tax evaders and all these people, their funding is cut. How can you cut funding of somebody that's going and collecting the money? And how can you find out who's working the system to cost the system extra?
Right. And so you can't pass a law and then automatically think millions will pour in. You have to have an enforcement mechanism.
Yeah, right.
If you don't have an enforcement mechanism, a department that's funded to do that, then you'll come up with the same result.
Let me tell you something that came up this morning. See if you agree with this. There was a caller that was concerned about Nanakai and about the parking and all this big kerfuffle going on out there. And I get that. We'll talk about that a little bit too, because it is going to affect other places, including even in your constituency. Maybe someday you're not going to be able to park by the beach because of some residents that want private parking. But somebody said that the tourists that ignore their tickets, we need to enforce it. It's automatically enforced. From a couple of listeners that told me, when somebody rents a car and they get a ticket and they ignore the ticket, HPD notifies the rental car company. Yes. The rental car company charges it to my credit card. Yep. 2 months later, ba-ching. Yep. So in other words, why don't we do that with everything? Why can't we do that with taxes?
What do you mean?
So the people can't go run away and hide. We're going to catch them. Your card's got to be on file with us. We're going to charge you.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I don't know about them holding all of your card
Yeah.
information.
But aren't those? See, that would be a good example, wouldn't it? In other words, let's say somebody comes, hey, I got a great idea. Let's make them give us a credit card. We'd take their taxes whether they pay or not. Then now you think, wait a minute. What about identity theft? What about all this stuff? Privacy laws. So maybe somebody would have a good intention in coming up with a bill like that, but in committee you'd have to say, you know what? This is not right. It's unconstitutional.
Right. And I think a lot of people do. They come to the legislature and they say, I have this great idea of how to solve this problem, but it breaks constitutional laws.
What's happening at the airport? Because I do know that some of the things being considered are this new airport authority, if you will, to run this thing. And, when we took a look at this earlier, we said, all right, this has not been legislated yet. It's being looked at. But it's being looked at with something, an attitude in mind to change the way things are managed. Isn't the same thing happening at other state places like the harbors?
Yeah, so DOT airports and harbors have a lot of concerns. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
I have a harbor in my district, Kalaeloa Harbor. I have an airport in my district, Kalaeloa Airport.
Yeah.
And so when I've had to interface with DOT airports and harbors, I realize what kind of things that these guys are up against and why things have been so horribly unorganized. So at the Kalaeloa Airport, one of the laws that's getting passed this year, hopefully, is that they're going to take off criminal penalties for general aviation infractions. So what happens is there are rules if you have a hangar and you're renting, right?
Right.
So you're renting a hangar from DOT airports. There are rules about where you put things, that you can't put
what you can do in there, right?
Right. You can't maybe have a barbecue grill in there. Okay, so I understand all of that.
Can't put your boat in there and work on it.
Okay, so at the end of the day, you got to tell these people, hey, those kind of things can't happen at the airport because it's a federal area, because of all these other regulations. But currently, those are all criminal penalties, meaning like if you put the trash can in the wrong place or if you break one of these, then automatically you have something on your record as you're a criminal. You've done this. So they're looking into repealing that. But the airport authority, people say, the airports are so horrible. We need this authority so that we can bypass things because it's taking so long. I mean, have you seen the bathrooms at the Honolulu airport? Have you seen the amount of areas that need to be cleaned and renovated? So they're saying that this airport authority is going to let us streamline so that we can all of a sudden magically get all of this stuff to happen. My biggest concern is that the Airport Authority Board is going to be 9 members appointed by the governor.
Yeah. So which puts it right back in their lap to do it or not do. See, here's the thing. You can understand where a constituent would be concerned about the neighbor island terminal. And, oh, yeah, this is bad. Bathrooms are dirty. But what about when a tourist gets off a plane? First thing they got to do is go to the restroom, and they go to one that's closed, or there's not one closed, or the floor's all busted up, and they say, hey, is this welcome to Hawaii? What a terrible place this has turned out to be. Our airport is tired. It's been beat up for the last 30 years.
Well, you have people on both sides of the issue because they're saying, oh, if we get this airport authority, then all of a sudden
everything's going to be okay.
Everything's going to be better. My thing is that if we had 9 members on an airport authority board, at least some of them should be required to have aviation background.
Perfect.
Currently in the law,
that nobody.
No, well, they said it's suggested.
Yeah.
It's suggested that they have business or aviation background, but it's not mandated.
Yeah.
If we don't have people that have aviation background that are part of the airport authority, are we going to be back in the same situation?
Did you take a look at the comparison that was being made? We got to ask you this before we go to news, even though it's not a state matter. There's a list the other day I saw of presidents that had people close to them and working on different departments that had or didn't have business experience. It's hysterical.
Well,
I mean, how many people don't have that? They're retreads from other political positions or other committees or other forums or other boards they've been on, and just keep getting reappointed with no experience.
Well, and that's the thing that people are so frustrated with.
Yeah.
How are these guys running an entity with no background in that expertise?
Maybe that's why Donald got elected. The art of the deal, right? Hey, more's coming up. It's Andria Tupola, House Representative Monday. Glad to have you with us. If you'd like to join the conversation, you may. When we get back, we're going to talk about the vacation rentals that are always there, and what can we do to help tourists like this Boston couple that get ripped off when they're in Hawaii? What can we do to put some more teeth in that law? Oh, and the ants come marching in and out. They do. So here's we're getting to the point where there's no new bills, there's no new considerations. There's some work being done in committees to clean things up before they get to a vote. But basically, Andria Tupola tells us we're in the 300-ish bills that are being looked at. And of that number, there's still a number of them that are going to go through. But one of the things that I think is very interesting, we talked about this a little bit before, is let's get back into this whole thing about Airbnb and vacation rentals and stuff like the Amazon tax and everything else. Every state tries to look after for itself, right? And so is it a surprise to you that they're expecting you guys to do the work for them? In other words, Airbnb, sure, they can collect taxes and then they can send us a tax. But by doing that, doesn't that expose somebody that is doing an Airbnb thing, but it's not doing it in their neighborhood? It's not permitted?
Well, yeah, in the hearing when we talked about this, one of the issues that we had with them is that there are places such as Outrigger that do condo rentals, and without having legislation, without being forced, they're paying taxes. So our question was, can you voluntarily pay taxes without being mandated? They said, oh, well, we wouldn't be obligated to do that if there was no law. But there was a state that actually started to impose penalties against Airbnb, saying that if they didn't make sure that things were legal and they were paying taxes, that they would pay a fine. Well, Airbnb took them to court and said that this is illegal for them to do that. But at the end of the day, are you running a legitimate business in Hawaii when, one, you're not paying taxes voluntarily, and two, you're not checking whether or not people are legal?
It must be sort of interesting because there are a number of these folks, and many of us have been barraged by their very effective media campaign that say, well, I can't make my expenses. With these guys, I can make my expenses. I didn't realize that you were supposed to be able to make your expenses by doing something in your neighborhood that might not be permitted to be doing in your neighborhood. That's what most of the neighbors are worried about, right?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. When people say we can't make our expenses, okay, so what we're trying to tell you is that if you're doing it illegally, then you have to find other ways, because making your home into a vacation rental in an illegal area is not permittable. Yeah, and isn't there, I don't know how we divide and conquer there, because I do know that if you know as a resident that something is going on, this probable cause thing is really interesting, right? Because you can't call the cops and have the cops go out to your house next door neighbor and say, you guys are running an illegal rental here, you got to stop, because that's not their job, is it? So you can call the cops if maybe they're too noisy, or if they're breaking some type of city ordinance. Breaking parking rules, whatever. Right. But no, at the end of the day, the cops can't enforce a illegal vacation rental. That falls under the city Department of Planning and Permitting, meaning are these guys permitted or are they in a legal area? So it goes back to the fact, if we have a law or even if we make a new law, is it going to be enforceable? Yeah.
Here's one that says, please ask Rep. Tupola, if you know darn well that your neighbor is doing that illegally, who do you report it to? Obviously, I don't know, but I do know that permitting and planning is one at the county level. That there certainly would be a way to be able to look up by taxes or by tax map key if something can be done in that area or not, right? You can't open an auto repair shop in a cul-de-sac in Kalihi.
Let me figure out at the city, because there was one testifier there from the city. Let me figure out if it's her office that you call.
Yeah.
Because I would love to give everyone the phone number of who to call if things are happening illegally. And I would love the city to step up their game in enforcement, because supposedly they need millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So go get it.
Okay, by the way, those of you that are on the phones that have given up, Paco will be back in the studio shortly, so please re-ring us at 296-KHNR or 296-5467. That would be somewhat comforting if we all knew that. It almost should be in the front page of the phone book, by the way, because isn't this a similar situation when you said earlier voluntarily? I shop online, you shop online, everybody maybe shops online. I don't feel guilty that I'm getting something without having a tax put on it. But that's because I'm trying to survive. But what about if I knew everybody was doing it, would I be comfortable? Yeah. But, that came up, right? Amazon is doing this maybe reluctantly. Are they reluctant about it?
With Amazon, I think that they're very forward-thinking, because honestly, they saw it in other states that slowly people are going to start taxing online. And I bet you anything they saw the legislation moving around in Hawaii, and they said, you know what, we better start taxing before they start enforcing this, so that we have money so that we can pay our taxes and not have to retro,
There's some people that have been doing this for a long time getting away with it. Let's say, forget about Amazon, because that would be, you wouldn't be going in reverse, you would be going forward, saying, okay, this allowed to happen, there were loopholes, here's the loopholes being done, you want to ship stuff to Hawaii, you got to pay us the tax. But that's a difference. If you get caught doing one of these Airbnb or vacation rental things, can they go backwards and say, your documents show, your income shows that you've been doing this, you owe us?
No, honestly, because there's not a law, I don't think you could retro enforce like a law what they call that is grandfathering in. So if there's a law passed, they typically have to say that the law is effective as of such and such a date. So you typically can't say, okay, we're going to make a law and this is going to be effective as of 1980. You can't do something like that, because going back and proving those records and making sure that everything is accurate would be impossible. So if there was a law,
it would be, let's face it would be impossible.
Right. If there was a law, it would have to be active as of this year or moving forward.
Okay. Now the IRS doesn't have any trouble going backwards as long as they want. However, most tax guys, like our guy David Ramirez, who comes on with us, gives tax advice. He says that generally speaking, if you're trying to come back to the family of taxpayers, they only go back a few years. They just want you back. Wouldn't the same thing hold true on that?
Possibly. Yeah, possibly.
Okay, let's go to the Big Island. And here's Lonnie on the Big Island, who apparently doesn't want any taxes. Well, on the surface, Lonnie, I can't say that I disagree with you. Good morning.
Well, just listening to your program, it sounds like both you and the guest are both pro-taxing, and you're very enthusiastic about getting as much as you can, because the government needs to spend it on whatever.
Wait a minute. I'm not sure you're interpreting what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is somebody that is doing something, generating an income, and not paying taxes on it is disservicing everybody that is paying taxes on their income.
Well, and I think that when we talk about the Airbnb...
Hold on. Let me say something. Okay, let's just say that's the case.
It is the case.
But how about the guy that mows lawns for some cash money? I mean, basically, it's just. Or how about the Uber? The idea is this: these people are devising ways to make extra income. Just because every damn thing here has gone. What's your average house?
Okay. Well, you said let me say something. Now I'm going to ask you to let me say something. What about if you're living right next door to one of these places that rents her house out and has parties every night, and you can't go to sleep because you got to get up and work in the morning? What do you think of that?
Well, I'd go over next door and tell them to hold it down.
Yeah, well, what are you going to do when they say, yeah, go away, old man? I'm not holding anything down.
I know the guy that owns the house.
Yep. And then what?
I mean, I'm not going to say, who are we going to call? The police? It's not the police's duty, but it is the police's. They're there for control that sort of thing.
In other words, wait a minute. Are you calling the police or not?
Negative.
Okay, so who's going to enforce it if the guy says take a hike?
Okay. Well, I'm an adult.
Yep.
And I'll make the decision when I go next door if they're not holding it down. And two, I will call.
Wait a minute. And what are you going to do? What decision are you going to make? You're going to punch him in the nose?
Negative.
What is positive? What are you going to do about it?
Well, I'm sure that they'll be agreeable.
You are?
I'm sure they're not being that riotous.
Yeah. You're not going to get an agreeable guy that's 3 cocktails into a party that's paying $2,500 a week for his house. He's going to say, "You get out of here."
I perceive that you are endeavoring to justify your position.
That's what I do for a living. I endeavor to justify my position. I'm happy to hear yours, but so far you're not making any sense.
Okay, well, I assume that you are making 100% sense because you're justifying your position.
That's what I do. I mean, but I do it with evidence. I asked you a couple simple questions. You couldn't answer them. So when you come up with an answer, come back and talk to us some more.
Here's more Mike Buck on 690 The Answer.
Okay, quite a bit of input to a couple callers ago. And you can't have your cake and eat it too, what most of them are saying. And by the way, Rep. Tupola has never voted for any tax increase of any kind, following in the footsteps of some other legislators. But the interesting thing that I've noted, Andria, about you is that you don't just say no. You say why, you don't say no. So I think that it's not just an automatic Pavlovian response. The minute you see tax increase, you go, no, without at least looking at it.
Right. And so when they had tried to pass the bill to make the online taxing in Hawaii through state law, our whole caucus voted against it.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want more taxes. And when we had the rail bill, I mean, there's a lot of legislators that voted no, and they just sat there because they don't want to talk openly about why.
Sure.
I mean, I stood up and I said, why? I mean, honestly, when you sat through that hearing, you hear the mayor ask for all this money that they need so desperately, and you think, all right, well, what am I going to say to my constituents to, I guess, tell them, why I voted yes on this? And I wasn't convinced. When I sat in the hearing, I felt like there wasn't enough information that was going to help me go back to my constituents and say, you know what, we need this. It was actually probably a step, if not many steps below what they did in 2015 when they came to present to us. They came and they gave me a binder. They sat me down. They told me about how wonderful the rail was, how this.
Yeah.
And then they come back this year and it's a 1-page testimony.
Yeah.
No handouts, no binder, no explanation, and they're asking for billions of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah, say, wait a minute, let's hold on to that. We'll talk about that specifically in just 1 minute. Before we run out of time, though, let's go visit our buddy Don, who has been a bird dog on one of these community care bills. And I'm not sure if there's been movement on it. But Don, good morning. Welcome to the program, as usual.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for
Sure.
the call.
Always a pleasure.
Andrea, thanks for coming on the radio station to update with us what's going on in the legislature. Concern Bill SB 530, I mentioned this a couple of times already, I think last week. I'm sure I sent Mike a copy of the West Side today. This letter, that email that came out from Senator Ihara's office, Leslie Ihara's office, about 5:30 for the husband to get more.
Okay, Don, you're going to need to get a lot closer to the phone.
Yeah, the husband to get more people to help him with his agency, as well as the Bill HB 1396. I always been. Can you elaborate any more about those two bills?
Okay, so for SB 530, for those of you who are listening, it makes an appropriation for the Office of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. So it appropriates money and it gives a full-time position.
This is Mr. McDermott or whatever his name is. He's a one-man band right now, right?
Right. So he's asking for help. So he, the Kupuna Caucus, or a group of legislators that want to support, Kupuna initiatives, they put forward this bill, but on March 21st, it was stopped dead in its tracks. So it passed second reading on the House side, but it didn't get referred for final reading, and it didn't cross over to the Senate.
Which means virtually that it's gone to sleep.
Yes. Yeah. So that bill, I would say, died. But hey, you never know. We have 14 days left, and I've seen things come alive from the dead.
So that's on that one, on 530, was it?
SB 530. Yeah. And then, Don, what is the other number?
HB 1396 with the private pay and the family community care home.
So this one actually went farther than the last bill that we just talked about. It actually got back to that from the House and the Senate, and it got notice to pass for third reading. And then the Senate disagreed with the House amendments, but right before it went to conference, it got re-referred back to committee. So it means that it went all the way down, almost to the finish line.
One step forward, one step backward.
Yeah. So if it was going to move forward, it would say there that it's gotten a conference committee referral. But instead of saying that, it says that it was re-referred to Human Services, Justice, and Fin, which means that they put it back into the committee for discussion.
So it still can move forward, you think?
I don't want to say no, because I've seen bills on the very last day of the very last session.
They get life put into. Somebody shocks them back onto the table, right?
Well, I've seen things happen that people wouldn't have guessed. So you never know. But on May 4th, it'll determine whether or not everything's completely dead.
Okay, thank you for the update.
Yeah, Don, thanks for your call, and thanks for bird dogging that thing. And I think that we circle the wagons and get back to what you're talking about with the rail before. I once again had the opportunity, I needed to drive out to your neck of the woods the other day, and I noticed the areas of, I don't want to say where it's completed, but where the big stuff is piled and the thing is standing there, waiting for more things to connect to it. And for the life of me, I can't see it not getting finished. I mean, I don't know what the options are. And yet, you said something that's really important. Last year, when they were out after this big caboodle of money, they gave you stuff to document why they needed it. This year, you get a piece of paper saying we just need more money.
Well, and they said, okay, well, it was our mistake. We hired a guy that has run rail operations but never built rail. Now we got a guy that built rail, so now we're on track. Okay, so
really?
That's still not enough for me to take back to my constituents. And the city hasn't spent $1 on this project. And the three things that people always bring up is, what about grade level? Meaning, like, what if we save money by taking it
back down to the ground or whatever?
They said that's not possible. Then people said, what about maglev? Let's change the technology so that it's cheaper. I asked that in the hearing. The mayor said that's not a possibility because they've already bought and purchased the rail cars. And if they change the technology now, they're going to have to expend more money. And people said, okay, well, we need this for traffic. The mayor said, this is not going to alleviate traffic. It's going to offer an option, but traffic will always be horrible. That's what he said.
Unfortunately, I mean, he's actually, a lot of people are saying, poor Kirk. He got dealt his hand. Well, that may be true. That's what happens. But if you say as part of a campaign that I like this, that I'm going to finish this, and it's going to be on time and on budget, we've already gone to the wall a couple of times where the people in the city are saying, hey, wait a minute. I thought you said there wasn't going to be a rise in real property taxes. So all of a sudden, is the state going to be the bad guy? Is it going to come back to the state? Isn't the ultimate responsibility, and don't you all talk about this, is if this city project fails, the state's got to pick up the money?
Well, and that's the thing, though, is that the city council members came forward and said, we're so sorry to put this on your back. This is such a heavy burden to carry.
Yeah.
Are they really sorry for us?
Yeah,
I mean, because it's a city project that is going bad, and they're asking the state to come bail them out. It's a city project. Let me repeat myself. It's a city project that wasn't well funded and well thought out, that we're all having to, pay the burden for.
Okay. On the other side of it, when we talk about taxes, I do know that the counties are barking as loud as they can from time to time to get a bigger share of the TAT.
Right.
Aren't we just looking at, no matter what, once I say it's them and us, as far as the taxpayer, as far as I'm concerned, the city guys and the state guys, you guys are all the same. You just want more of my money.
Well, and so one of the bills we had coming forward had dealt with the TAT. So the Senate came forward and actually suggested that the counties get more. So what happens for everyone listening is that the TAT monies come in, but the counties are only appropriated $93 million.
Right.
If more than that comes in, it doesn't go to the counties. So what the Senate suggested is
it goes to the big black hole.
Right. It goes to the general fund.
Yeah.
So what the Senate suggested is that we take that threshold up to $108 million, and then we let the counties have more of the TAT. So that bill is actually going to go into conference. None of the counties want to lose TAT money, so they're always hesitant when the state starts talking about it. But I do think that they should have more of the TAT if we're actually generating more, because they need the help.
Okay, so here's one that says, I know that the state legislature picks on the county and on the cities, but what do they do when they need more money? Aren't they painted into the same hole when all they can do is raise the state income tax?
It's true.
Yeah,
I mean, this buck gets passed back and forth, and I would say that it is not uncommon to have the state have to, find money to bail themselves out as well. We have unfunded liabilities that we have to cover all over the place, and I would agree with what you're saying about.
Aren't we at risk also? In some of these monies have been taken away from funds that were collected to be paid, and now they don't have the money, like the retirement program. Every now and again, somebody just says, "Well, let's just take it from over there. We don't need that yet." But yet, aren't we just kicking this thing down the road? Sooner or later, the bucket's going to be empty.
That's what everyone says.
Yeah. Okay, so what keeps you fired up? This week, the big one on Andria Tupola's desk.
We're trying to see if the rail bill is actually going to get a conference committee hearing. Because if it doesn't, that means that we've either chosen to go with the Senate or the House version. I mean, everyone wants to know what's going on with that bill. But
there is going to be some sort of... It's still going to cost the taxpayers more money, but we just don't know for how much longer. Is that fair?
Well, so the Senate version is different than the House. In the House version, they said that they would give the city 2 more years, an extension of 2 more years. The Senate version, I think, said nothing.
Yeah. However, I'd like to be a fly on the wall listening to some of the lobbyists and some of the deal making going on this one. Huh? Okay, so Andrea says no taxes, but I have a plan.